Alright, peace. Shalom, shalom. First and foremost, giving honor and praise to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov. Giving double honors to 7130 South Chicago that taught me this truth. And giving double honors to all the brothers and sisters that the Creator has awoken in these last days. With that being said, peace and shalom. Alright, brothers and sisters, I was out camping today, for a little bit, and I was looking at the people, and I can see how the people, today, these are the heathens' feast days, and they're commemorating whether they understand it or not, and most people don't understand it. They're commemorating the death and resurrection of Tammuz, which is supposed to be the reincarnation of his father, Nimrod. And I watch the people, and they go shopping and things of this nature. But I can see how the system today is what we would call the European common market system is falling. Is because I can remember when I was a little kid. See, if you would have came downtown in the 80s, the whole city would have been lit up. See, it would have been decorations everywhere, but you don't really see that too much. They still celebrate quote unquote Christmas, but we can see over the decades that the system is dwindling down, right? So, with no further ado, we're going to be reading from the 13th chapter of the book of Revelation. If you hear the heater on the background, it's cold in here, so I got the heat on. But I'm going to be talking about the 13th chapter of the book of Revelation, and we're going to expound on some things, right? So, with no further ado, let's take a look, right? So it says, and I stood upon the sand of the sea. Now, this is a revelation that's given that John on the island of Patmos, he's inspired to talk about these things, right? So it says, and I stood upon the sand of the sea. And the sea represents unorganized masses of people that's in a chaotic state, right? And it says, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea. And the beast represents a governmental structure, see, that's going to rise up out of chaos and take control over the masses, right? So, when we start looking at history from a biblical standpoint of view, we have to go back to, quote unquote, I think it's the 10th chapter. Matter of fact, let's get it. Let's see if we can find it real quick. The 10th chapter of the book of Genesis, right? Let's see if we can find it real quick. Then we're going to go back to the scheduled program, right? Right? Let's look at this. This is the 10th chapter of the book of Genesis. So it says, and Cush begot Nimrod. It says, he began to be a mighty hunter. It says a mighty one in the earth, right? He was a mighty hunter before Yah. Wherefore it is said, even Nimrod the mighty hunter before Yah. because he wasn't hunting tigers and bears and things of this nature. He was one of the first conquerors of the world after the flood, right? So when we go back to the book of Revelation, the 13th chapter, it says, you know, talking about the sea represents unorganized masses of people. And it says a beast rise up out of the sea. Now the beast represents the Babylonian mystery system. Now, when we first start looking at this, we have to go all the way back to Genesis, the 10th chapter. It's because Nimrod, I think he ruled over the Akkadian Empire. See, when they start talking about Babel, it says, in the beginning of his kingdom was Babel. Now, that's not what they called it back then, but Babel is symbolic of what? Confusion. Because if you got a person that's babbling and they're not speaking a proper tongue, you don't really understand what they're saying. So from a biblical standpoint of view, when they say his first kingdom was Babel, he built a society and social order that was contrary to the Creator. It was the land of confusion. It may have looked at beautiful and things of this nature. They probably built kingdoms and stuff like that. But the mindset of the people, was contrary to the Creator, right? So when it says, in the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, that's symbolic of what? The land of confusion, right? So when we go back to Revelation, right? When we go back to the book of Revelation, the 3rd chapter, it says, and I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea. Like I say, the beast represents the Babylonian mystery system. See? And it came up out of what? Confusion. Because regardless of if people believe it or not, people want to be ruled by something. And the empire that came up out the sea was what you would call the Babylonian mystery system. And what did it start to do? It started to conquer and rule over the masses. It says having 7 heads and 10 horns. Now, the 7 heads is symbolic of the 7 kingdoms that rule before one another. So let's start with the first one. The first kingdom that was established was the kingdom that was set up by Nimrod, Semiramis, and Tammuz, right? Well, really, Nimrod, you know. The first kingdom was the kingdom that was set up by Nimrod. That's number 1. Number 2 is Kemet, or Mizraim, or what we call today is Egypt. That's number 2. Number 3 is the Assyrian Empire. Number 4 is the Babylonian under Nebuchadnezzar, the Chaldeans. Number 5 is the Medo-Persians. Number 6 is the Greeks. Number 7 is Rome. And they said the 10 horns. Now, the ancient 10 horns, because the 10 horns is the kingdoms that came out of the Roman Empire. So, the ancient 10 horns was the Visigoths, the Vandals, the Franks, the Suviads, the Hercules, and all these people. They were, quote-unquote, the Europeans that came out of the, quote-unquote, Caucasus Mountains. But later on, it transformed itself just as well. And now the children of those people is what we look at today is the European common market system. See, we looking at Germany, we looking at France, we're looking at England, see, Luxembourg, all these people. See, those make up some of the 10 toes. So the 10 toes of today that we're looking at is the European common market system. So this is the vision that John saw on the island of Patmos. See, he saw these kingdoms that was ruling. So when it says having 7 heads and 10 horns, those were the kingdoms that he saw. Maybe he understood it, or maybe he didn't. But it's our responsibility today to understand these kingdoms that he saw in the vision back in those days. And it says upon his horn 10 crowns. 10 crowns still represent the 10 horns. And upon his head the name of blasphemy. Because now you gotta look at it. What would they be doing that will be blaspheming against the Creator? They're gonna be worshiping something that's contrary to the Creator. That's what really blasphemy is. It's because you're gonna set up a worship system that's contrary to the Creator. So these kingdoms, these social orders, they were all set up and they was doing things that was contrary to, they not following the Creator. And see, this is what we looking at today. You know, when I was outside today and we can see the people, they finishing their Christmas shopping. You know, and the worship system of Christmas goes back to the Babylonian mystery system. Most people can't see it is because they looking at Christmas. They looking at the tree, the lights, the presents. But they don't understand that these pantheons or these systems of worship was worshipped thousands of years ago under different names. See? So when Greece was celebrating quote-unquote Christmas, they didn't call it Christmas. It was called by something else. The Medo-Persians, when they were celebrating these festivals, it was called something else. And they was dealing with it probably from another perspective. You know what I'm saying? But it all goes back to the worship system of Nimrod. See? So it says, and the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard. Now, who is that talking about when it talks about the leopard? They talking about who? They talking about Greece. See? They talking about Greece. And his feet were as the feet of a bear. Who are they talking about? They talking about the Medo-Persians. And his mouth as the mouth of a lion. Who are they talking about? They talking about the Chaldeans. They talking about Nebuchadnezzar and the boys. Right? So these 3 kingdoms, what it says about them. And his mouth as the mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave him power. It says, and the dragon gave him his power. So what does that mean? That means that they were following after Satan. That's what that means. Because every time we talk about the dragon in scripture, they talking about the devil. Now you know most people don't I would say that they're not outright worshiping the devil on purpose. It's just that we have been conditioned to worship the devil. Because see, when we're young kids, when we start dealing with these festivals, and we start dealing with these the festivals, and start dealing with a lot of the stuff that's going on in the country, we don't know that these festivals and a lot of this stuff that we're doing goes back thousands of years ago. And when the people was worshiping the stuff thousands of years ago, they did it in this true form. They were sacrificing people, right? They were sacrificing animals and stuff like that to these gods. We don't know that. So what has happened is they have, for 1,000 and something years up until today, they have dumbed down a lot of these different festivals to make you worship these festivals. It's just like the movie. It's just like the movie, The Matrix, when Neo ate the pill. He ate the pill, and the next thing you know, he was coming out of this cocoon thing, and he was attached to the Matrix, but eventually it had detached itself from Neo, and Neo started to see all of the bodies and stuff like that was attached to the Matrix. And that's the mentality of the people today, because we have been conditioned for so long to follow after the system, that we are plugged into the Matrix, and it's hard for us to detach ourselves from the Matrix, is because a lot of us that have the blue and the red pill, we're giving it to the people the wrong way. See, we're giving it to the people the wrong way is because, see, the so-called black man, which is the parent stock of the Israelites, see, we're still mad because the white man put us in slavery. But we got to understand that it's not the white man that really put us in slavery. The white man was motivated by the Creator to put us in slavery. So when we start to give out the blue and the red pill, we have to give the people an opportunity to make a choice. And what is that? To follow the Creator in the Creator's truest form, see? Because the gospel of the kingdom that we're talking about today is a judgment message, brothers and sisters. And the judgment message is towards the Gentile world power system. But see, when we setting up the kingdom, we can't set up the kingdom the same way that they did, dealing with racism and classism and things of this nature, because that's not true brotherhood. So when we say, and the dragon gave him his power, the dragon gave the elites that was ruling in these kingdoms, he gave them their power. And this is what we looking at with the American system. This is what we looking at with Russia. This is what we looking at with the nations that's ruling around the world. See, they are all under the influence of the adversary. So I was thinking to myself, I can remember looking at tapes you know, I was born in 76, right? I'm considered a 80s baby, right? So when I go back into history, I was looking at history of the Vietnam War. And prior to the Vietnam War, they had what you would call a draft. See, they had a draft where they were drafting people fresh out of high school and things of this nature. I forgot what ages that they were drafting them up into, but they had a lottery. And the lottery had different names and things of this nature of people that was drafted to the Vietnam War. So when I look at the people today, they're being drafted even to this day. And see, the drafting that we're looking at today is not going to be the same thing that that we saw in the 70s or the 60s or whatever. The Creator is drafting the human family into what you would call the Third World War. Because if you're not really under the influence of the Creator, you're going to be destroyed, see? Because there's only one master builder or king that's in the earth today. And that's the Creator of the whole human family. See, and we're of the opinion that the Creator is Yehovah, or who we call Yah or Yahweh or Yahweh even to this day. See, that's the firstborn of all creation. That's the Son of the Father. So when we look at the people today and they're worshiping these holidays, they're really following after the adversary. So it says, and I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wounds was healed. And all the world wondered after the beast. Now, what scripture are we going to look at to counteract what's being said right here? Let's look at the book of Daniel, the 4th chapter. Let's see what Daniel is talking about, right? Let's look at Daniel, see if I can find it. I always had trouble finding Daniel. I don't know why. We're going to find it real quick. Come on. All right, we here. We at Daniel. Let's look at Daniel, the 4th chapter. And, you know, we got to start reading at the first verse, right? Matter of fact, I don't know if I want to read from the first verse. I probably start reading at the... Hold on 1 second. I'm trying to pick a point where I want to read, but I might have to start at the first verse. Let's look at this, man. It says, this is Daniel, the 4th chapter. I'm going to start reading at the first verse. It says, Nebuchadnezzar. Now, Nebuchadnezzar is, you know, he's considered the first beast. But, you know, Nimrod is the one that started everything, right? But when you go to Daniel, the 7th chapter, when it's talking about the 4 beasts, they list the Chaldeans or the Babylonians as number 1. So it says, Nebuchadnezzar, king unto all people, nations, and languages that dwell in the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. I thought it good to show signs and wonders that the high Elohim had wrought towards me, right? But see, before he's speaking like this, when he's talking about God or the Creator, you know, and his arrogancy, he was talking about his gods, see, his power. And like I said before, his power and his God was the sun god, which is Nimrod. See, this is who they was worshiping back then. It says, how great are his signs and how mighty are his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. Now, you know, when Nebuchadnezzar lost his mind, the Creator had him to have a nervous breakdown. Then he started to give the Creator his flowers, his just due. But in the beginning, see, when Daniel came to him, he thought that Daniel was under the influence of his gods because, see, he conquered the nation of Israel. So let's look at this. It says, I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at rest in my house and flourishing in my palace, and saw a dream which made me afraid, and the thoughts upon my bed and the visions of my head troubled me. Therefore made I a decree to bring all the wise men of Babylon before me, that they might make known unto me the interpretation of the dream. Because, you know, the soothsayers and all these people, they were the prophets of Nebuchadnezzar, see. Then came in the magicians, the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers, and I told the dream before them. But it says, but they did not make known unto me their interpretation. It says, but Daniel came in before me, whose name was Belteshazzar, because, you know, Daniel was conquered. The nation of Israel was conquered under them, and they had to be nourished of the king 3 years before they could stand before the king, meaning that what? They had to come under the influence of the Babylonians. They had to learn their ways according to the name of my God, see? So you got to be very careful when you're reading this, is because it will make you think in Nebuchadnezzar's inception that Nebuchadnezzar is talking about Yah, but in his arrogancy, he was talking about the gods of the Chaldeans. It says, in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. And before him I told the dream, saying, O Belteshazzar, master of magicians, because I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in thee, and no secret troubled thee. Tell me the visions of my dream that I have seen, and the interpretation thereof. See, and a lot of times this is where the Christians get the whole thing of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, because they're worshiping all these different pantheons that was worshipped thousands of years ago. There's really nothing but, I would say, the Father and his Son, which is Yah. See, there's no 3 gods. But the nation of Israel was only dealing with one God, and that was Yah. See? But check it out. It says, Thus were the visions of my head in my bed. I saw, and behold, a tree in the midst of the earth, and the height thereof was great. See? The tree grew and was strong, and the height thereof reached unto heaven, and the sight thereof to the end of all the earth. And what tree are they talking about? They're talking about the first beast. They're talking about the Babylonian under Nebuchadnezzar and them. See? They was ruling. The leaves thereof were fair, and the fruit thereof much. In it was meat for all. The beasts of the field had shadow under it, and the fowls of heaven dwelt in bones thereof, or boughs thereof, and all flesh fed of it. And see, when it's talking about the fruit and the leaves, they're talking about what? All the natural resources of the earth. See? Because they controlled it. That's the same thing that America is doing. They control the whole earth to a certain extent. Not just America, the European common market system. It says, I saw in the vision of my head upon my bed, and behold, it says, a watcher, a holy one came down from heaven. Yeah, when I'm through, I'll do it. Thank you. How's it go? It says, behold, a watcher, a holy one came down from heaven. And see, who was the watcher? The watcher is really the creator and the angelic host. See, they came down to see what's going on. And it says, and you know, that's all symbolic, because the creator ain't got to come down and do nothing. The creator already know what's going on, you know. And it says, so when it's saying, I saw in the visions of my head upon my bed, behold, a watcher and the holy ones came down from heaven, that's really talking about what? Judgment of the system. See? That's what that's talking about. The creator ain't coming down nowhere. The creator is all-knowing. He see what's going on. Why would he have to, you know, he's somewhere in another dimension. He don't know what's going on. So, he see, look at these niggas up. Let me come down here and see what's going on. No, the creators know what's going on. That's just what? Symbolism. What we call that? Figurative language couched in historical symbolism. That's all that is. The creator know what's going on. So when it's talking about the watchers and the Holy One come down from heaven, that's really talking about judgment on the system. See? Now the creator is in the process of taking the system off the scene. He cried aloud and said thus, hewn down the tree, cut off the branches. Didn't I just say that in the 13th verse? See, the 13th verse represents what? Judgment of the system. And see, this is why when we look at Christmas today, when we look at Easter today, we look at all these so-called high holy days today, they don't have the same umph or the same they ain't popping like they used to be popping back in the day. See, I remember when I was a kid in the 80s, you know, I grew up in the projects. Even in the projects, it was jumping. These holidays. And then, you know, your parents may drive you around downtown. You see, man, it was jumping back in the day. It ain't jumping no more. because we see the dwindling down of the system. See, ain't nobody worshiping these even Christianity. You know, a lot of black people was a part of these churches, whether they was Baptist or they was Methodist or whatever they were. See, a lot of so-called black people is not following this stuff anymore. That's how you know that the system is falling. From a political standpoint of view, people was involved in politics. They not involved in that stuff like that no more. Why? It's because the Creator has come down to the human family. But see, we think that when the Creator is going to come back, he going to come back as a so-called black man, or he's going to come back as a so-called white man, or whatever pantheon that the people was worshiping at this time. But that's not what's finna happen. The Creator is amongst us today. And this is how because why? The system is falling. See, the people is at an all-time low. Now we starting to see the so-called white man, the Creator, is pushing these people into the Cold War spirit, back when they was proud to be a racist. See, now you see the Proud Boys and all these different people coming up. Now they comfortable with calling black people niggas. Why? It's because they're being pushed back into the spirit that they had when they came over here in the 1400s up into the 1700s and the 1800s. So let's look at some things, right? Where's my pen? It says, he cried aloud and said thus, hewn down the tree, cut off the branches, shake off his leaves, and scatter his fruit. Lest the beast, it says, let the beast get away from under it. Meaning that what? I'm finna crush your system. I'm gonna crush your system. It's because the system that you created was contrary to me. See? You didn't create a system with brotherhood and honor, and you didn't honor me as the Creator. You set up your own system. Nebuchadnezzar and them came in as a battle axe to the nation of Israel. So they ruled in the affairs of man until the Creator took them off the scene. So now who's finna come on the scene? It's finna be what? Medo-Persia. After Medo-Persia, Greece. After Greece, Rome. And now we dealing with the extension of the Roman Empire, which is the European common market system, brothers and sisters. See? And the fowls from his branches. Nevertheless, leave the stump of his root. It says, nevertheless, leave the stump of his roots in the earth. Because when you get rid of a tree, you just can't cut down a tree. You got to get rid of the roots. First of all, you got to take the stump up. When you push the stump up, then the roots is going to follow. But it says, nevertheless, leave the stump of his roots in the earth. Meaning that what? Another kingdom is going to come after Nebuchadnezzar. Even with a band of iron and the brass and the tender grass of the field. So when we looking at this, brothers and sisters, we got to understand that this was a time in the season where these kingdoms was going to rule, is because they're ruling over the nation of Israel, y'all. So it says, and I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wounds was healed. That's why we went to Daniel, the 4th chapter, We was talking about that. We was doing the knowledge on that, right? So each one of these kingdoms that was taken down, it rebuilded itself after another kingdom that took over. And all the world wondered after the beast. That's what we doing today. We're wondering after the beast. We're not worshiping the Creator. Because how you going to worship the Creator? The Creator never set up Christmas. Then you got these wicked pastors. They sitting up here talking about, well, you know, Christmas. We know that Christmas is not his actual birthday. That's just something that we set aside to commemorate the Messiah. But who told you to do that, though? There's nowhere in the Bible that says that the Messiah was born on December the 25th. Whether you want to go by some of the Europeans, they celebrate them in January. Some of them celebrate December the 23rd. It don't matter. Who told you in the Bible that the Messiah was born on this date? And who told you to worship the Messiah as a God? See? So when we doing these things, we're worshiping the beast. And who is the beast? The beast of today is the Roman Empire, y'all. We still up under Rome. But we're dealing with the residue of Rome, which is the European common market system. It says, and they worshiped the dragon, which is the devil, and gave power unto the beast. See? When we want to join the army, all this type of stuff. And I'm not saying that you can't get involved. You know, people got to work. They got to do certain things and stuff like that. All I'm saying is that just because you in the system, you don't have to take on the mindset of the system. See? Because you got brothers and sisters that's in the army. See? They working. But you got to understand who you are as a person, and then you understand who everybody else is. These are the people that's engaged in the system. See? My country, 'tis of thee, the land of liberty of DIC, the land where my see all that, the land where my forefathers died. See, this is worshiping the system. See, they wandering after the beast. They worship the dragon, which is the devil. They giving power unto the devil, which gave power unto the beast. And they worshipped the beast, see, which is the Roman Empire, saying, who is like unto the beast, and who is able to make war with him? That's how we are with America. See, America is the greatest thing on the earth. Who is able to stand up against America? So with that being said, brothers and sisters, I'm going to deal with part 2 of the lesson. Shalom.